Okay.
Sasha Vezenkov, a huge EuroLeague final. Team comes up short, but a big time performance from Sasha, 29-9-4. Kings fans have been glued to this brother now for weeks since the Sacramento Kings playoff run came to an end. EuroLeague is over. What's next?
What's next? I think his buyout window probably goes until I think last year it was July 20th, international buyout window. And so next is we'll probably hear rumblings like
Give me that
whether
date again. That was July 20th.
I think it's July 20th.
So it's well after free agency starts.
Yeah, it's after free agency starts. But either way, I mean, if we could hear that he's coming over at any time,
Okay.
we could even hear parameters for a contract, but they can't sign him. They won't do anything until July 1st. That's officially that's when
So it's
free
just
agency
like
starts.
free agency. It's essentially the start of the new fiscal year for the NBA.
Yeah, because the Kings at this point they don't have salary cap space to sign him right now.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a mechanism at this point. They do still have I'd have to look it up, but we're gonna see here in the next probably week whether or not he's coming over. That would be my guess, and then we'll probably even know the parameters for a contract. But none of that is going to get done officially until we get into free agency, and the Kings have to figure out how they're going to use their salary cap space.
Mm-hmm.
Are there going to be a team that basically acts as a team that's at the cap or over the cap, or are they going to act as a team that's well under the cap? And they have options to do that because you have this giant cap hold for Harrison Barnes. As of right now, you're not considered a team with cap space. But if you were to move away from Barnes or rescind his $27.5 million cap space and then make a couple of you could get to 32, 34. Even if you can find a taker for Rashawn Holmes, you can get over 40 million in cap space. And so the Kings could be a major player in the free agent market. And then you want to line your things up. Like we talked about this before, when you sign, you have to use your cap space first, and then you would use your exceptions go away, but then you could use a room exception after that. There are ways to structure your contracts. And it really does come down to when you sign a guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go back to...
So the order is really important in how you approach
the
this.
order is very important. So let's go back to the year that the Kings signed Trevor Ariza. Let me think. Was that... No. The year they signed Dwayne Dedmon. So who else did they sign in the Dwayne Dedmon
Wasn't that
year?
the same year? I think that was Trevor Ariza's year, wasn't it?
That might be Trevor Ariza year. Yeah. No, I think Trevor Ariza was a couple of years earlier with Zebo and George Hill.
Okay.
So the year that I might be wrong there. Boy, all of them playing in together.
These years of greatness, all the Kings have had in the free agent market, they're all blending together.
These magical years, the 1920s.
What year did they get Marco Bellinelli?
That was earlier.
Yeah, that was definitely.
Yeah, that was definitely earlier. But the year that that is a Trevor Ariza year. So they went out that off season, and they were able to. There's one other player that they're able to land, but either way,
was it Rashawn? Didn't they get Dwayne?
They
Dedmon
did get
Rashawn,
but see, the point I was going to make is that they got Ariza, they got Dwayne Dedmon. I think they traded for Ken Bazemore that year. They signed Corey Brewer late. There's another player that they signed during the offseason, but their offseason, what they had to do is they had to sign these other guys first. And then we had a press conference, and we thought Rashawn Holmes was going to be at that press conference, but he wasn't allowed to be at the press conference yet because they hadn't signed his contract yet. So, Corey Joseph. Thank you. That's the other one. So they signed Corey Joseph, they signed Trevor Ariza, and they signed Dwayne Dedmon. They used all of their cap space, and then they used a room exception to sign Rashawn Holmes. But what basically they had to get all of these contracts lined up, all of the physicals lined up and all done. And then we got to the press conference day, and Rashawn Holmes hadn't officially signed his contract yet because all of the other mechanisms had to happen first. And so he wasn't able to be part of the press conference.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, it really does come down to like a weird order that you have to sign players.
And so I guess all we're really waiting for, there's nothing left to watch with Sasha. Like his season is over.
Yeah, yeah, but I assume he's going to play like in the European, like he'll play for his country after this. He'll play for Bulgaria if there's some sort of tournament this summer, which I believe that there is. Whether it's like
It's
European championships.
2023, so the Olympics are next year.
Yeah, but there might
Yeah,
be
so
like
there are.
European
Yeah,
championships.
yeah, I think they're because the tournaments are the year before the Olympics, I think.
Yeah, so I would be surprised if he
2.
didn't go and play overseas
Okay.
and stick around. But I think he'll be over here. Like I'm the Kings are pretty convinced that he's coming over, and they've really put the full court press. We talked about why Matina would be there,
Mhm.
talking about contract, like getting him out of his contract and everything else. I think that there's a good shot that he comes over this summer. And look, I've said it. I think he's a really solid rotational piece, but for me, I don't think he's a starter. And I also I like what he brings. I had someone within the organization tell me one time that they believe that there was probably 4 players on the current roster that could go to Europe and do what Sasha Vezenkov did this season. But that doesn't mean everything.
4 players on the current Sacramento Kings roster that could
Yeah,
do
they
what he
could
did?
go over and have the season he just put up,
Okay.
where he literally carried a team all the way. I mean, a smaller Greek team.
Yeah.
He's only making Olympiacos is a good solid. It's a big name club
Mhm.
in Europe, but still, you're talking about a player who made less than $2 million this year. Like for him to have this type of season, this type of impact, to win 3 MVPs basically, and take a team all the way to the finals, that they don't like. There was only a handful of players on the Kings roster that could have done what he did. But I don't know how much that, like, because look, Mike James is over there like dominating as well. And that's what my point would be like, I'm not sure. We don't know how his game will translate. I think he will actually probably translate really well because he's a pace and space guy, great off the ball, great back cut, incredible shooter, all these things. He's only going to have more space to work with at the NBA level than he does in Europe. And so that's a good thing. There's going to be he'll fit, I think, seamlessly into their offense, whether he can play defensively, whether he can, be anything other than a guy who comes off the bench and gets you 12 to 14 points a game and hits a bunch of threes. I'm not sure.
One thing I've struggled to figure out a little bit when it comes to some of these overseas players is like the pros and cons of their age, what positives their age brings to. Because like with Luka, I always looked at Bogey. You would hear probably some of those people who had dumb things to say about Chris talk about, well, Bogey's going to evolve. This is just his first year in the league. He's going to once he get used to the NBA, he's going to change. And all I kept thinking is, when Bogey got here, wasn't he like 25, 26 years old? Like, how much are you going to change at that stage of your career? Like, even if it was 24 years old, like how much are you going to change? On the other hand, Luka was what, 18, 19 years old? Like, this kid still has tons of time to figure out his game while figuring out the NBA game. I can't figure out if being 27 is a pro or a con for Sasha in this situation.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because people jumped on me on a podcast for saying like Cam Johnson's still a young player. He's 27 years old, but I don't consider Sasha the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because Sasha's been a pro since he was 15.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's 12 years into his professional career.
Yeah.
And, Cam Johnson has been a pro since he was 20. And so he might be 6 years in, 7 years in. And Sasha's role has always been, the last couple of years, and he's gotten better and better and better, especially like since the Kings traded for his rights, he's become a much, much better player. This is not the player that they traded for. It's the player he's become over the last 2 years, where he started to build MVP resume and stuff like that. But with a guy like Cam Johnson, you still see room for growth. And it's realistically because his career he's always played with much better players. He's never been this star on a team. And I wouldn't think that Cam Johnson would be a star in Sacramento either. But you're looking at a player that has potential to have more upside, where Sasha has been given that sort of leeway over the last couple of years to become a star in Europe. He's been the number one option. He's been, everything to a team. So I don't know that Cam Johnson can be that. And I'm not saying that that's a potential for him, but you're looking at a player who, again, has been a pro for 6 years or 7 years versus a guy who's been a pro for 12 years. That's much different.
What I can't, and so is Sasha. And I guess this is the question that we'll all have to wait to find out. It's just, it's hard to. You're talking about Matina being over there, and that's after we talked about Jordy being over there, and that was after we talked about Mike being over there. And what was it, Jay Triano, who was one of the first coaches to go? I don't remember what other but we keep talking about different people who have gone to see him. And I think you tweeted after I don't remember who the last person to go see him was, but it was your full court press tweet. And what I just get hung up, like, is he better than Trey Lyles? Like, or does he do what Trey Lyles does? Is he just another Trey Lyles and you can never have too many versions of a Trey Lyles? Or could this, we had a joke one day where we were talking about, I think Jimmer. We were talking about players we couldn't, surprise weren't in the league. And you look at Jimmer scoring these absurd numbers in China. And we were like, well, okay, well, what does 80 points over there? What does 80 points in China compute to NBA points? And obviously there's a lot of tongue in cheek in that conversation, but what does 27, what were the numbers I just read? 27, 9 and 4 in the biggest game you're going to play over there compute to, 1 of 82 in the NBA.
I would look at more of his season stats, where he averaged around 17.5 points per game and around 8 rebounds per game.
So did he not pick it up during this tournament? Because it felt like every day he was averaging, and again, I know you said the regular season, but it feels like we've been talking about him scoring 20 plus points this entire tournament.
Yeah, European league play, you usually don't play that many minutes. And then when you get to the, into the big tournament here, where he's playing for a EuroLeague championship, he's playing huge minutes. I mean, he's playing 36, 38, 40 minutes a game. He's playing the entire game. And so, yeah, I think that he is a player that has turned it up, but that's because of the type of play that they're talking about. So during the regular season, he's pretty straight up in both leagues. He averaged right around 17.5 and 8 rebounds per game. Now, whether that translates to the NBA or not, that's a whole nother ballgame, because now we're talking about college stats. Keegan Murray averaged 24.7 and 8.7 or rebounds per game at the college level. That's not translating.
But you are talking about other pro players. Now, they might not be NBA pros, but you're not talking about 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. You're talking about other 27, 28, 29-year-olds. Potentially, there might be a 17 or 16-year-old in there on an opposing team. But for the most part, you're talking about other seasoned pros in these tournaments.
Well, yeah, the quality of play in Europe is good.
Yeah.
It's physical. I mean, even if you look at the team that he was, his Olympiacos team during the EuroLeague playoffs, they had Tariq Black and Isaiah Cannon on their team. So they have former NBA players. This isn't, even if you look at the team he lost to, it's Lowell has been one of the great European players for almost 2 decades. But you had other players that are playing in that game that had NBA experience.
Do you recall how similar Bogey's numbers were in you, maybe not necessarily his first year, but maybe his time in Sacramento versus, what he did in the EuroLeague?
Very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was his first year, he averaged 12 points, 3.5 assists, 3 rebounds. Second year, 14, third year, 15. He's averaged for his career 14, 3 and 3. And as a European player, when he was coming over, those are kind of the stats that he was putting up. And you didn't think he was going to take some tremendous leap. Yeah, like I can look at his stats and in Serbia, like for the FIBA World Cup, he put up big numbers, but his like Fenerbahce is the year before he came over, he averaged 14.6, 3.6, and 3.8. Basically the same player he has at the NBA level.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, I know we could get into this debate about like how Luka was supposed to come over and like be as a player. Luka Doncic was outstanding in Europe, but outstanding in Europe was like 19 points per game, and he wasn't a good shooter. And so everyone's saying, oh, we knew he was going to be a superstar like day one. You thought he'd be like 28-8 or 27-7 or 18-7-7, but you didn't know he would be 30 something because he had never really done that in Europe. I mean, he's very talented, but again, the European game is different. They didn't have the same type of like the same runway that he's had.
Well, how much of that was projection though? In that, hey, this kid is 18. This kid is 19. He's really good. He can shoot. He can find the basket. He can pass. Like, there's a lot of things this kid can do that's pretty amazing. He gets a year or two into the league, and obviously his rookie year was incredible. Somehow his second year was even more incredible. But how much of that talk, again, this goes back to the original question about age. Bogey was, 20 something years old, 24, 25 years old.
Yeah. He turned 25 during his first season.
And, now we're talking about Sasha, who's 27. Again, Luka was very different in that you could project forward, I think, because he was so young in his game still, despite the fact that even he had been a pro for a handful of years, was still very raw.
Yeah. And like, here's what my point that I would make. Like the 2017-18 season in the EuroLeague play, Luka averaged 16 points, 4.3 assists, and 4.8 rebounds. In the Liga ACB play, he averaged 12.8 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Like, these are the numbers. And also, Luka had been a pro since 2014-15. So we're talking about like 15-year-old Luka. Like,
Yeah.
he had been a pro for, by the time he got to the NBA, 1, 2, 3, 4 years. He'd already played 4 years as a pro. And so you could start to project what he would be as a player. But again, we're looking at a guy who as in European play, career-wise, shot 33% from 3. He was never like a great shooter. So for like folks to say, yeah, we knew he was going to be like a Hall of Fame player. No, you knew he would be a really good player, but you didn't know how good he would be as a scorer because he had not proven that that's who he was at the European level. And I mean, same with Ricky Rubio. Everyone wanted to say Ricky Rubio is going to be the greatest, European point guard to ever come over. He's been really solid. He's had a great career, like overall, but he's never lived up to the hype.
No, he didn't. He didn't live up to the hype, especially coming out of that gold medal game in 2008, where it was like, oh my God, this kid is one of the most amazing players I've ever seen.
Well, I mean, as a passer and everything else, those skills translate, just like Bogey's skills translate. So I think with Sasha, his shooting numbers will translate. His rebounding numbers, not so much.
And it's weird how that's the one that seems to fall off so much with people.
Rebound?
From either, but both from EuroLeague and college. It's a completely different game trying to grab the basketball in the NBA.
Well, especially at the NBA level too, you got to remember that a guy like Sasha is going to be on the perimeter a lot. So if he averaged, like, because I don't think he'll play the minutes that he would in Europe, if he averaged 4.5, 5 rebounds a game, that's probably fine. Like, I don't think he's going to come into the league and average 17 and 8 like that. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, there's always that possibility that he just,
if he does that, I think we all win.
Yeah. Well, the Kings certainly are, a much better team if that's what he can do, as long as he can hang on the defensive end at all. And that's going to be my concern. Like, he's a very good inline driver. He's crafty around the rim. He's got a float game. Again, the off-ball movement is what you're going to love. I think the Kings don't have a player like him right now that can play, that can cut and make the moves to really allow Sabonis to, set a guy up. And we'll see that with